Okay, well, I hope everybody is going to have a wonderful Earth Day today. It sounds like there's a lot of stuff going on out there in the real world, according to what we're hearing about Biden's speech and everybody else. But this one might be a little bit different than what you're used to, because I'm not going to speak very long. In fact, what I'm going to want is everyone else to contribute to this discussion, for us to come up with some recommendations, perhaps for the world and perhaps just for ourselves, as to where we want to see the world go. So I'm going to start and just give a little bit of a background, a little bit of a historical perspective on some things, and then I'll start going into the questions, and I'll read the questions, and then I will take down the shared screen so we can talk about them. And then once we've finished with the first round of questions, I'll bring the screen back up to talk about some more questions. So, okay, Earth Day in context. Today is the 51st Earth Day. In 1969, we landed people on the moon, and the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught fire. We celebrated the first Earth Day in 1970. After 1970, we sent a few more people to the moon. But since then, we've sent robots to the planets, asteroids, moons, and outside the solar system. On every trip outside of Earth's atmosphere, we've sent microbes, some that may remain dormant until conditions are right. We don't know which microbes we have sent, and this is after all the efforts of NASA to try and make sure that we don't send microbes. They know their threshold is 10 to the minus some ungodly number, but they know they've sent microbes. And why is this important? Well, in 2000, a group of scientists found some old salt crystals that were 250 million years old. These had not recrystallized or decrystallized, and inside there were some bacteria. And guess what they did? They regrew them. So 250 million years from now, as the Voyager spacecrafts are heading into another solar system, they may be bringing life from the Earth that could reanimate. And this is a big question, you know, how much are we doing? How much are we sending out? And what might be coming back from other places that we've sent out 250 million years later that we have no immunity to. Now, let's go back to 1970 and hear from Tricky Dick. The great question of the 70s is, shall we begin to make reparations for the damage we have done to our air, land, and our water? This was his big thought initiative. We can think about the same kind of thing that Biden is announcing today, to have emissions in the air. So what has happened? Well, we began here with Pogo. It's hard walking on this stuff. Yep, son, we have met the enemy and he is us. So as we're beginning to see here, the early 70s, a lot of it was about water and air and total pollution, the Cuyahoga River and all the other stuff that was going on. And we could see this in some of the key regulations and agreements we've had since 1970. In 1970, the EPA was established and Don Ruckelshaus was the first administrator. Then we get the Endangered Species Act of 1973, the Clean Water Act in 1977, the follow-up of the Clean Air Act. We had the Superfund in 1980. And one of the couple of things that they did, what was very smart there, was first was joint and several liability, which basically says if they find a Superfund site and they can't identify who produced the chemical that 12 companies have manufactured in the past, all 12 companies must respond to the Superfund. We don't care. That second thing that happened was all the insurance companies, pretty much to a company, put a pollution exclusion and liability insurance in the mid-1980s. Basically, you're on your own if you pollute. Now, later on, they brought in pollution insurance that was very expensive to buy. But what this did was got the insurance companies to, got the manufacturers to basically police themselves more than they had in the past. Nothing's perfect, but it helped. We had the Montreal Protocol on ozone that got rid of the CFCs that were making the ozone, depleting the ozone. We got that in 1989. So we're starting to get a little broader. This is a world effort. The Kyoto Protocol in 1997 on climate, and the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015. So you can see the change has moved from simple local problems in pollution and clean air and water to a much larger project dealing with climate change. Now, what's happened? Rivers in many places have been cleaned up, but more is necessary. Then again, we have a killing field of plastics in the Pacific that few microbes can digest. DDT has been planned, and we have many more birds like vultures, eagles, and ospreys today. However, we planted hundreds of thousands of acres of grass along the Atlantic flyway, which Canada geese love, and only a few flocks migrate anymore. And part of that has to do not just with the geese loving the grass, but the fact there isn't a lot of snow on the grass anymore, or it doesn't last very long. The elm trees that once dotted the town squares are all torn down because of fungus we unwittingly imported from Europe. And when 3 months of this jump to humans, COVID-19 became prevalent in every other inhabited continent. So what we've done is we've gone from local to worldwide in a span of 50 years. And I think that's a very significant change in our focus. Now, the divisive climate debate. We bemoan climate change with all its manifestations: melting permafrost, eroding shorelines, bigger hurricanes, vanishing glacier, ghastly air pollution in places like China and India. But despite a ream of data from all corners of science, the problem remains that climate change is not easily defined. Even science has no holistic view on just what climate change means and how to resolve it. This void of understanding has easily been filled by political voices just as urgently branding the climate change agenda as one that is designed to take away cars, freedom, oil, balloons, plastic straws, drift nets, and other critical rights and necessities of capitalistic societies. With the thing that we sent out a little bit earlier this week, I believe, or late last week, NASA put out some very interesting thoughts about why we should be grateful for the Earth. This is our only place of residence. We can take deep breaths. There's solid ground, seasons. Its gravity doesn't turn us into noodles like Saturn or Jupiter would. We can enjoy a pleasant breeze. We got a sparkling globe of blue, white, and green. We got clear skies, sunny days, and water we can swim in. We have dry land, and the entire world isn't smothered beneath miles of ice and cream puff clouds that come and go. Now, what about Mars? We hear Elon Musk and everybody else saying, "Oh, wow, we're going to go to Mars, and we're going to be there. We're going to be okay in Mars." Well, we may need Mars in about a few billion years from now as the sun expands, as it goes into its death throw and becomes a red giant that will be larger than our orbit of Earth. But they don't know how thick that sun is going to be, so we don't know what really is going on. And here's some of the problems we have right now about Mars. Number one, it takes 7 months to get there, and it would take 7 months to get back. Right now, we must bring everything. And think about that. How are we going to build things like aluminum smelters or iron ore smelters or grow everything that we need? We need to live underground. Why? Because the air's thin. It's colder than Antarctica. Any water is going to be salted. There are massive dust storms with howling winds that cover the planet certain times of the year. There's no magnetic field, a lot more radiation. There's desert everywhere, but there's thick ice at the poles. And that ice might actually melt as the sun goes farther out when it gets older. But that may be a much hazier sun than they have now, which is a rather hazy sun. It always looks like a little bit like sunset or sunrise in Mars. And we have lower gravity, which means some bone loss for the people who go there. So how can we contribute to Earth Day 2021? And so what I'm asking is, what is missing in the climate change debate is a fundamental question of just what do we want the world to be like for us and future generations. We can begin by asking, what questions should we be asking on Earth Day? Let's begin with a look at some of the fundamental questions we should be asking and answering. And these are pretty simple. What should Earth be like? Which begins with three simple questions. What kind of a world do we have? What kind of world do we want? And what must we do to get there? And what does the planet mean for us? And what else should be asking? So I'm going to, with the basic three questions, what do we got? What do we want? And how do we get there? I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for discussion from everyone.